whether or not he really needed to go back to Ottawa to do that this time, and whether or not in doing so he was taking more advantage of that than was necessary. So I think that was a good move for him, because it does demonstrate for someone who's quite unknown to the country that he can do this role already.
Balance all things.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
For you, Nikki, a lot of talk this week, not just of tariffs, of course, but affordability. People talking about housing, food pricing, etc. I mean, you name it, they were talking about it. Is that what people want to be hearing about right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. There was some interesting data from Abacus this week that it's talking about, because this week we start to shift in to the leaders debate. I always argue this is when the voters started to pay more attention to the campaign. And so with the leaders debate, the questions were around, what are the top issues you want to hear from leaders? And the public saying dramatically, and of course, where we're at, they want to hear about Trump and tariffs and what leaders are going to be doing to address that economic impact. But right after there is housing, and next is healthcare. So I think that's something for not only the federal leaders but provincial leaders as well to be paying attention to, as while we're all talking about that fear and potential impact around what's happening economically, those really important issues aren't dropping for the public as well. And they're going to be listening to the leaders in the debate to see who's balancing out that response, but also knowing that they're going to be supporting what they need in their daily lives.
Mm-hmm. We'll have to see how it all, what they have to say and how it all pans out. We haven't really seen Mr. Carney in that kind of milieu, so it'll be interesting to see how he does. How do you think it is going to work out? The Conservatives seemingly having these large crowds. I know there were some journalists in there counting, and while they were still large, not as large as they were being reported by the party. Regardless, is that a good way to gauge where the public might be looking?
I think the crowds are meaningful. The people with the better polls say polls count, and the people with the better crowds say crowds count, and then each of them says the other one doesn't count. So
science,
science, of course. So I mean, it all matters. I think the really important thing about the crowd size, and I think it does show through in the polls as well, is the commitment, the motivation, the dedication of the Conservative support. It is stronger. The Liberal support has been softer in the polls. They're learning about Carney. He's new to them. They're kind of like, oh, like maybe this guy. That's why I think the debate is going to be so important. He has taken a pause on his campaign this week, purportedly to do prime ministerial things, although he had some meetings and did not speak to the media after and had nothing to announce after, which makes me wonder whether perhaps he's more interested in avoiding questions around sort of some uncomfortable things around his relationship with China, some uncomfortable questions around where he pays his income taxes. Does he pay his income? Does the Prime Minister of Canada pay his income taxes in Canada? Pertinent question that he has not been able to answer so far. Use of tax havens with his companies, things like that just are like awkward things to have to answer and be on the spot for. When the debate comes around, he's going to have to answer some of those questions. So I do think it's going to be really fascinating to see how he answers those questions. It will be a moment when Canadians tune in and just really get a taste of what he's all about.
You mentioned a little bit there about foreign interference. Both the Conservatives and the Liberals in particular looking at that and being asked about it. Liberals maybe not being too forthright. I believe when Mr. Carney was asked about it this week, he leached out, I don't know, kind of thing. The Tories did respond to concerns from the Indian government, or some supporters anyway, putting in a significant amount of money, I would suppose. I don't know. Do you think it's a concern? Should they be addressing this in this election?
Well, foreign interference is hugely important to address, of course. And so when you have the election interference watchdog saying that China has been aggressively boosting Mark Carney's message on their platforms, that's really concerning. It's one of the questions he's really wanted to avoid by going into hiding. So I think it does raise questions about what is it that these foreign governments are liking when they're looking at these candidates for prime minister. What is it that they're looking to achieve?
I think it's interesting because as we talk about the presence of disinformation and foreign interference, it also goes back to some of the conversation about what we're seeing, because we can only look in an election to things like polls and other indicators. But I also think there's just a huge amount, we saw this not only in the BC election, we saw it in the American election, now disinformation and fake information for voters. So I think, again, that's why it's so important in a week like the leaders debate that people start to pay attention to what people are saying. And so in these debates. candidates as leaders. So that's critical because they're not necessarily getting a lot of the truth out there when they're looking at social media or when they're looking in their WhatsApp chats about what's happening within politics, and there's not a lot that they can see. I think, switching back, I think, to the leaders' debates a bit, this is going to be really where we see some differentiators this week as well on how they can address some of these issues, but also I think, how they're going to be standing up for what Canadians, so back to thinking about Canadians standing up for healthcare, housing, those things that people are talking about so dramatically. One of the things I think I'll just pivot into what the NDP is doing this week as well, and I think that really is showing and where they'll be looking for Jagmeet Singh to stand up in the debates as well, is to talk about these Canadian values around healthcare, around what people are looking for in their daily lives at the kitchen table that benefits them, and how that stands out in where some of the other leaders are talking about programs and budgets and where there might potentially be cuts. But voters are need to do their work more than ever to try to get a full sense about where parties are at or find any information off and on.
Every topic has been touched upon, but not necessarily delved into enough to make a fulsome decision for the voters. So yeah, a little bit of homework, everyone. Oh boy. Well, you're a teacher, you know all about homework. Right.
Better do your homework, kids.
Now, obviously, a former Green executive here for the BC party. How the Greens federally? How are they doing?
Well, kind of in and around where the NDP and the Bloc Québécois. I mean, this is a two-party race. I think everybody, like the Greens and the NDP, are trying to just hold on to the seats they have with the incumbents they have. Elizabeth May's seat is a tight three-way race, so it's going to be challenging. I think the leaders' debate gives an opportunity for all of the leaders to basically punch in the way they need to. I think that, if you're trying to convince people in your riding to vote Green or NDP or Bloc Québécois at this point, and not Liberal because you're afraid of maybe Pierre Poilievre, this is the chance. I think if you're Pierre Poilievre, you got to make up some numbers in the polling. There's a lot of pressure on him, I think, going into this leaders debate in order to convince people to come back to the Conservatives. And if you're Mark Carney, you're trying to convince people that, yes, while you're Prime Minister and you can handle Trump, that you're going to address the issues like housing and affordability. And I would say, speak to the people that are going to be coming over to you. How are you going to manage things like climate change? I mean, I know it's way down there in the polls, but I mean, this is a real issue. And come the summer, when we're back experiencing the fires and the heat waves and landslides because of the fires have been wiped out, I mean, this is a real issue for people. And I think he's got to demonstrate that he can do more than just manage the economy.
All right, well, we will be watching and taking in those debates for sure. Thank you all for coming in today. Much appreciated. All right. Stay with us when we come back.